You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart? This isn't a yoga studio. The words hung in the crisp morning air like a challenge, echoing across the parking lot of the Blackstone Tactical Training Center. Laughter followed. A deep, masculine chorus that rolled through the line of men standing by the gate. Every head turned as a small woman stepped out of her old blue sedan, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to Courage and Honor, Veterans TV channel, so you never miss these fascinating tales of courage. And let us know in the comments where you're watching today. Her name was Emily Carter. The rising sun caught the faint outline of scars along her knuckles as she pulled a worn duffel bag from the trunk, its faded navy insignia the only hint of her past. She paused, squinting at the towering structure ahead, an old military compound reborn as one of America's most elite private security academies. Pickup trucks lined the lot, each one oversized, polished, and screaming testosterone. Next to them, her small car looked almost apologetic. 15 men were already gathered, talking loudly about deployments, training, and classified operations. Their laughter carried bravado. Their body language demanded space. Emily walked toward them without hesitation, her posture straight, her eyes calm. Conversations faded one by one as the group noticed her. The first man who spoke, massive, tattooed and sunburned, was called Harris, though everyone already knew his nickname, Tank. "You lost, sweetheart?" he said again, smirking. "This here's Blackstone, not SoulCycle." A few men chuckled. Another, a bearded guy with a Special Forces patch on his backpack, added, "She probably came to take notes for the real recruits." Emily said nothing. She had long ago learned that silence was its own kind of armor. She set her bag down near the edge of the group, her movements deliberate, precise. Inside, her heart was steady. She had endured worse, far worse, than the judgment of overconfident men. Sergeant Davis, the instructor, appeared moments later. His uniform was crisp despite his weathered face. "Morning," he said, voice rough from years of shouting over gunfire. "Welcome to Blackstone Tactical. You were chosen because you said you could handle the hardest 6 weeks of your life. We'll see if that's true." He handed out folders, contracts, waivers, and medical forms and continued, "Only 5 of you will make it to the end. The rest will wash out. Some of you by choice, some because your bodies will quit before you do." Emily caught a few sideways glances as Davis spoke. 2 men whispered behind her, "I'd give her half a day." "Nah, 2 hours tops." She ignored them. When the paperwork was done, Davis led them on a tour of the facility. The halls were lined with photos of grim-faced operatives in foreign deserts and jungles. Glass cases displayed rows of advanced weaponry, rifles, ballistic helmets, body armor. The air smelled faintly of gun oil and disinfectant. "Every one of those pictures," Davis said, pointing to a wall of framed portraits, "is someone who trained here and lived to use what they learned. Don't assume you'll join them." As the recruits followed, Tank and the bearded man, who introduced himself as Martinez, continued their commentary. "Look, no offense," Martinez said, "but this program eats people alive." "You sure you want in?" Emily just smiled faintly. "That's why I'm here." Her calm tone disarmed them for a moment. Tank raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The tour ended back in the briefing room where Davis handed out schedules. "Tomorrow at 500, he said. "We start with a 5-mile assessment run. That'll separate the talkers from the doers." As the men dispersed, some lingered to talk about past deployments and weekend plans. None invited Emily. She didn't mind. She walked to her car alone, started the engine, and let the silence settle over her. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a small, knowing smile. They had no idea who she was or what she had already survived. Tomorrow, she thought, they'll start learning. The alarm screamed at 4:30 a.m., but Emily was already awake. She lay still in the darkness, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator in her small apartment and the distant rumble of early trucks on the highway. Her body felt calm, centered, ready. She had spent years learning how to prepare before the storm, how to make silence her weapon. By the time she reached the training grounds, dawn was only beginning to lift its pale light over the Blackstone compound. The parking lot glistened with dew. One by one, the others arrived, yawning, half-dressed, eyes bleary from lack of sleep or too much beer the night before. Tank's massive diesel truck rolled in with a roar, and Martinez's motorcycle followed, loud enough to wake the dead. Emily stepped out of her sedan without hurry. Her uniform, Black cargo pants, gray t-shirt, and polished boots, was spotless, pressed, ready. She carried herself with quiet focus while the others cracked jokes to disguise their nerves. Sergeant Davis was already waiting, his arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Physical assessment," he announced. 5 miles full terrain. 40 minutes cut off. Fail to meet that, you're done before breakfast. He paused, his eyes sweeping over the group. And before anyone asks, the standard's the same for everyone. Tank snorted softly, muttering, "Guess we'll be sending someone home early." Emily didn't respond. She simply adjusted the strap of her watch and looked out toward the misty trail that disappeared into the woods. When the whistle blew, the recruits launched forward in a wave of noise and ego. Tank and Martinez sprinted ahead, their heavy boots pounding against the dirt like hammers. The others followed, shouting encouragement, feeding off each other's adrenaline. Emily, however, stayed at a steady pace, her breathing smooth measured. The first mile cut across open ground, still slick with dew. Within minutes, the leaders were panting harder than they should have been. Emily kept her rhythm, letting her legs find the cadence they had known for years. Years of dawn runs through sand, humidity, and exhaustion. By the second mile, the course dipped into the forest. Roots and rocks turned the path treacherous, and the group began to spread out. Tank's early sprint was costing him. His breathing had grown ragged. Martinez stumbled once, cursed under his breath, and pushed harder, trying to keep his lead. Emily slipped past 2 recruits who had started walking. She neither looked at them nor spoke. Her focus narrowed to the sound of her own breath, the earth beneath her boots, the faint rustle of leaves above. When she reached the 3rd mile, the terrain steepened into a brutal incline, followed by a shallow stream crossing. The cold water splashed over her boots, numbing her ankles. Tank was ahead, shoulders heaving, his once confident stride reduced to a grim shuffle. She passed him without a word. Martinez was next. He tried to increase his pace when he noticed her gaining, but his limp betrayed him. She overtook him easily before the 4th mile marker, her form steady while his collapsed into desperation. The final mile twisted through sand and loose gravel, a deliberate test of endurance. Only 2 recruits remained in front of her, both younger, both pacing themselves smartly. Emily adjusted her breathing, then began to close the distance. Her steps were quiet but relentless. By the half-mile mark, she passed the 2nd man. Then the 1st. She crossed the finish line 30 seconds ahead of everyone else, stopping her timer at 31 minutes, 47 seconds. Her breathing was heavy but controlled. She walked in slow circles to cool down while others collapsed dramatically onto the ground. Sergeant Davis stood beside the timing board, jotting notes on his clipboard. His expression was almost unreadable, but his eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than the others. 31:47, he said quietly. "Not bad, Carter." Behind her, the recruits stumbled across the line. Tank barely within the limit, Martinez limping and several minutes late. 3 others didn't finish at all. Their training was over before it began. When Davis dismissed them for the morning, an uneasy silence hung among the survivors. The laughter from yesterday had vanished, replaced by wary glances. Tank sat on a bench, drenched in sweat, his face red with humiliation. "Guess she wasn't kidding," someone muttered. Emily said nothing. She just took a long sip of water, her eyes fixed on the distant tree line. She could already feel the shift, the moment when disbelief began to turn into something else. Respect, maybe, or fear. For now, she didn't care which. She was here to prove something, to herself, not to them. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring a different kind of test. The gym at Blackstone smelled of sweat, metal, and quiet desperation. It was the 2nd day of training, and only 12 recruits remained. Sergeant Davis stood at the center of the massive facility, clipboard in hand, his voice echoing off the walls. "Today we see what's left in your tank after yesterday's run. Strength, agility, and composure under pressure, Emily." Carter tightened the wraps around her wrists and glanced around. The others were already watching her, some with open curiosity, others with bruised egos still raw from being outrun by a woman half their size. Tank avoided her gaze, pretending to adjust his gloves. Martinez leaned against a bench, his injured leg wrapped in elastic tape. The first test was rope climbing, 20 feet straight up, no legs allowed. The thick manila rope dangled from the ceiling like a serpent daring them to rise. One by one, recruits went up, muscles straining, faces flushed red. Most made it, but just barely. When it was Emily's turn, she stepped forward without hesitation. She didn't need to psych herself up with grunts or chest thumping. She simply took hold of the rope, her grip confident, her body moving in smooth, economical motions. 12 seconds later, she touched the beam at the top, then descended calmly, precisely, without a sound. Davis clicked his stopwatch. 12 flat. Fastest so far. Tank muttered something under his breath. Martinez just stared, his lips pressed tight. Next came pull-ups. Minimum standard 15 clean reps. The first few men managed to meet it. Most struggled after 10. When Emily jumped up to the bar, the room grew quiet again. She completed 25 in perfect form, her body straight, motion fluid. When she dropped down, her breathing hadn't even quickened. By the time the agility course began, even Davis's neutral expression had softened into something approaching respect. The obstacle setup was brutal. Tires, low crawls under barbed wire, walls to climb, balance beams, and a narrow tunnel ending in a sprint. Points deducted for hesitation or missed touches. Tank went first, muscling through with sheer force but burning precious seconds with every misstep. Martinez followed, gritting his teeth against pain but moving slower than anyone else. Then came Emily. She moved through the course like water, flowing, shifting, never fighting against the motion. She dove under the wire in one smooth glide, scaled the wall with a controlled burst of power, and sprinted across the balance beam without losing a step. When she crossed the finish line, the timer read 43 seconds, nearly 10 faster than the next best. The recruits exchanged uneasy glances. The silence was heavier this time, tinged not with mockery but with something like awe. Then Davis gave the signal for the final test. Combat simulation. Foam knives. Protective gear. One-on-one eliminations. Tank immediately volunteered. "I'll take her," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Davis raised an eyebrow but nodded. 3 points wins. No strikes to the head. Control your power. Tank approached like a brawler, relying on his size and brute strength. His swings were wild, each one heavy enough to break bone if the weapon weren't padded. Emily didn't counter right away. She moved lightly on her feet, circling, watching. When she struck, it was precise, one fluid motion. Inside his guard, tapping his ribs. 1 point. "Carter?" Davis called out. Tank growled, charging harder, trying to overwhelm her. She ducked under the next swing, sidestepped, and scored again. 2 points. The final hit came seconds later. A feint left, pivot right, tap to the chest. 3 points. Match over. Tank froze mid-swing, staring at her in disbelief. His chest rose and fell like he'd run another 5 miles. Emily's breathing, by contrast, remained calm, almost steady. She offered her hand. "Good match." He hesitated, then took it. His grip was firm, his pride wounded, but his tone sincere. "You're fast. Real fast. Speed's just timing," she replied softly. After the simulations ended, Sergeant Davis gathered the group. His tone was brisk, but there was a note of satisfaction behind it. "Some of you performed above expectations today. Others," his eyes flicked toward Martinez, "need work. The training ahead will be harder. If you think this was rough, you're not ready for week 2. He paused, scanning the room before continuing. "One more thing, don't underestimate quiet people. They're usually the ones paying attention." When the recruits were dismissed, Emily packed her gear silently. Around her, the chatter was subdued, the usual boasting replaced with murmurs. Outside, Tank caught up to her. His tone was different now, respectful, even curious. "Look, I don't know where you trained, but I've been around long enough to tell skill when I see it. You're no rookie." Emily met his gaze, calm as ever. "Everyone starts somewhere." Tank nodded, unsure how to read her, then turned toward the parking lot. She watched him go, then allowed herself a faint, private smile. The day had ended the way she expected. Questions unspoken, doubts growing and respect beginning to take root. Tomorrow, she knew those questions would only deepen. The next morning began with gunfire echoing across the open range. Brass casings glinted in the sunlight as they fell onto the gravel. Sergeant Davis walked behind the firing line, his voice sharp and unrelenting. "Control your breathing. Front side press reset. Every round tells a story about your discipline or your lack of it." The recruits stood shoulder to shoulder, M4 carbines braced against their shoulders, eyes squinting at targets 50 yards away. For some, the rifle still felt foreign in their hands, too heavy, too precise. For Emily Carter, it felt like an old friend. She had spent years with a weapon like this, learning to read its subtle recoil, its rhythm, its voice. But here at Blackstone, she kept that history buried. Tank fired first, short, heavy bursts that tore the air but sprayed wildly across the target. Martinez followed, his legs still giving him trouble, his shots erratic and low. The other recruits struggled to maintain steady patterns, their hands adjusting too much, their stances off balance. When it was Emily's turn, she stepped forward without hesitation. She adjusted her stock, exhaled once, and squeezed the trigger. 10 rounds in quick succession, each hit clean, centered. Davis watched through binoculars. "Group's tight," he murmured. "Adjust your sight 2 clicks right." Emily made the adjustment and fired again. Another perfect cluster. 20 rounds in the space of a silver dollar. No one said anything, but every pair of eyes was on her. The afternoon moved to pistols, Glock 19s, standard issue. Shorter range, tighter margins for error. The recruit's earlier bravado had dimmed. Fatigue and quiet frustration had replaced it. Emily, however, seemed almost serene. Her draw was fluid, her aim instinctive. The weapon became an extension of her breath. 20 rounds, 20 hits within the 8 ring. She reloaded smoothly, each movement measured and precise. Tank, standing a few lanes down, lowered his pistol and shook his head. "I swear she's done this her whole damn life," he muttered. During the break, he approached her, curiosity winning over pride. "All right, I'll bite," he said. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that? Some kind of police background?" Emily wiped her hands with a rag, her tone even. "Something like that," he laughed softly. "Something like that, huh? You ever think about going pro? You'd outshoot half the contractors I've worked with." She smiled faintly. "I'm not here to prove I can shoot. I'm here to see who I am without the uniform." Tank frowned, sensing more truth beneath the words but letting it go. After lunch, they transitioned to tactical exercises, building clearing, room entries, and threat identification. The training complex had been built like a labyrinth. Narrow hallways, low light, fake hostiles behind every corner. Each recruit would clear the structure solo while instructors watched through cameras. Speed mattered, but precision mattered more. Tank went first, moving slowly, too carefully, missing hidden threats that appeared in his blind spots. Martinez followed, limping through the course. His shots rushed, his judgment off. When Emily's turn came, she entered the first doorway without hesitation. Her movements were fluid, each corner sliced with the muzzle of her weapon, each step controlled. She cleared rooms as though she had done it 100 times before. She scanned high, low angles first, breathing steady. When she engaged, her shots were quick, efficient, final. No wasted rounds, no wasted time. 2 minutes and 18 seconds later, she stepped out of the final doorway. "All hostiles neutralized," said Davis, checking the feed. "0 civilian hits. Fastest time today and cleaner than half our staff instructors." Emily nodded once, her face unreadable. Inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. The quiet satisfaction of being back in rhythm. That night, during the classroom portion, the group gathered for a lecture on threat assessment. Most recruits slouched in their chairs, half exhausted. Emily, however, listened intently. When Davis posed a complex scenario, an embassy under attack, multiple unknown threats, her analysis was sharp, detailed, almost surgical. She spoke of entry points, line-of-sight vulnerabilities, and layered defense strategies that only someone with field experience could know. Tank stared at her as she spoke, realization dawning behind his tired eyes. After class, he caught up with Martinez in the parking lot. "You heard her in there," Tank said quietly. "That wasn't book knowledge. She's done this. For real." Martinez nodded slowly. "Yeah, and she's not just some ex-cop or weekend warrior. You see the way she moves? The way she shoots? That's professional training. Real-world stuff." They looked toward the far side of the lot where Emily was loading her gear into her sedan. Her posture was calm, shoulders relaxed, face expressionless in the pale streetlight. "Who the hell is she?" Tank murmured. Martinez didn't answer. Emily drove off into the dark, headlights cutting through the mist. The road ahead was empty, silent, and familiar, the kind of silence she had missed since the Navy. She knew she couldn't keep her past hidden forever, but not yet. Not while she was still learning who she could be without it. Tomorrow's schedule said advanced close protection. She smiled faintly. Now things would really start to get interesting. By the third week, the Blackstone Training Center no longer felt like a school. It felt like a battlefield of exhaustion and quiet reckoning. Only 7 recruits remained, each one stripped down to the core of who they really were. The bravado, the jokes, the inflated stories, they'd all burned away under the relentless heat of discipline and exposure. At dawn, Sergeant Davis assembled the survivors outside a massive warehouse complex. The chill in the air carried the faint metallic scent of gun oil and rain-soaked earth. "Today," he began, "you'll put everything together. Tactics, teamwork, decision-making. You'll move as a unit. Life scenario. You screw up here, and people would be dead in the real world." The exercise. A simulated hostage rescue under time pressure. Tank, who had slowly transformed from skeptic to reluctant believer, naturally took command. His voice was steady now, his arrogance tempered by respect earned the hard way. "Carter," he said, "you're on point. You see things before the rest of us do. We follow your lead through the first breach." Emily nodded, her face impassive. Inside the warehouse, the lights were dim, the air thick with the smell of rubber and dust. Gunfire crackled through speakers and alarms blared. Foam bullets zipped through the air, their impact harmless but loud enough to make adrenaline spike. Emily led the approach, low, deliberate, silent. She moved with an ease that no civilian training could teach. Her body knew what to do long before her mind had to think. 2 targets appeared near the main corridor. She signaled wordlessly. Tank flanked left. Martinez provided cover. Within seconds, both hostiles were neutralized, clean entries, controlled bursts. The rest of the team fell into rhythm, guided more by instinct than plan. Each turn, each movement seemed to flow through Emily, as if she were conducting an orchestra of controlled chaos. Halfway through, a new problem emerged. A hostage mixed among threats, one holding a fake explosive device. The team hesitated. Emily didn't. She stepped forward, read the stance, the hand tension, the micro-expression of fear versus defiance. 2 seconds later, her shot took down the hostile cleanly, the explosive harmless. Tank stared, speechless. "How the hell did you—" "Training," she said softly, already moving to the next room. They cleared the rest of the structure in perfect coordination. No civilian hits. All hostiles down. Extraction time. 44 minutes, 12 seconds. When the simulation ended, the silence in the control room was palpable. Even Davis, who had seen thousands of exercises, looked impressed. He met the team at the exit, arms crossed, expression uncharacteristically proud. "Outstanding work," he said. "0 casualties. Flawless execution. That was a professional-level performance. You've just done something that teams twice your experience have failed to pull off." Tank, drenched in sweat, turned to Emily. "You planned that entire operation in under 5 minutes. Who are you?" She gave a small smile. "Someone who's had a lot of practice staying alive." Later, in the locker room, the unspoken tension broke into words. Tank and Martinez cornered her, not in anger this time, but with the urgency of curiosity. "Carter," Tank said, his tone quieter than usual, "you move like you've done this for real. We've all been trying to figure it out. What's your story? CIA, Spec Ops? Something like that?" Emily didn't answer right away. The echo of dripping water filled the pause. "Does it matter?" she said finally. "It does when you make the rest of us look like amateurs," Martinez replied. Before she could answer, Sergeant Davis entered. "That's enough," he said, his voice even but final. "You'll all get your answers soon enough." The following morning, Davis called everyone into the briefing room. Only 5 recruits remained. He stood before them, clipboard tucked under one arm, his expression unreadable. "Before we begin the final assessment," he said, "there's something you need to understand. You've all been wondering about backgrounds, experience, qualifications." He looked directly at Tank. "We run full background checks here at Blackstone. None of you came in as mysteries, except in how you'd handle being pushed to your limits." He paused, then turned to Emily. "Emily Carter, former Navy SEAL. 4 years of active deployment, Afghanistan, Iraq, and multiple classified operations. Advanced sniper certification. Close quarters combat expert. Commendations for valor and field leadership." The room went silent. Tank blinked. "A SEAL?" he whispered. "Former SEAL," she corrected quietly. Davis nodded. "She entered this program under her real name, full disclosure. We accepted her not to test her skills, but to test ours. She is, by design, our benchmark. The men looked at her differently now, not with doubt or resentment, but with the kind of respect born from humility. Tank swallowed hard. Guess that explains a lot. Martinez chuckled softly, shaking his head. We've been trying to keep up with a damn Navy SEAL. Emily met their eyes, her expression calm. Everyone here had something to prove. So did I, Davis continued. And she proved something more important than skill. She proved professionalism, restraint, the ability to lead without dominating. As the final 48-hour assessment began, something remarkable happened. The recruits no longer competed against her. They learned from her. Emily coached them through tactical planning, corrected their stances, shared tips about teamwork and survival that came from experience, not theory. By the end of the final test, all 5 had passed. Every one of them had become stronger, not because of her secret, but because of the example she set. At graduation, Tank approached her, his voice thick with emotion. I came here thinking toughness meant loud voices and big muscles, he said. Turns out it means quiet endurance and people like you. Emily shook his hand firmly. Good teams make everyone better, she said. That's the only kind worth being part of. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was sincere. As the sun set behind the training compound, Emily stood for a moment by her car, breathing in the cool evening air. The challenge was over, but something inside her had settled. She had come to Blackstone to test herself, to see if she still belonged to something greater than her own past. Now she knew. Some wars end when the shooting stops. Others end when you finally learn who you are without the uniform. And for Emily Carter, that was the hardest battle of all.